Cool. So welcome to another UMedia Learning Labs Network webinar. We're going to do a mini webinar today with Ryan Hill from the Yale Gallery of Art, Yale Art Museum. Is that right, Ryan?
It's Yale University Art Gallery.
Yale
Well, it's a
University Art Gallery.
museum,
Thank you.
but it's just an old style way of calling
So we have Ryan Hill, we have Kendra Davey from the Pima County Public Library in Tucson, and Adrian Strock from the Nashville Public Library. And Adrian and Kendra are going to be asking Ryan a few questions about his webinar, or about his resource that's about transitioning leadership. What happens when you are leaving your institution and you want to leave a little bit of, I don't want to say yourself behind, but a little bit of your legacy behind to make sure that things still run smoothly. Kendra, why don't you take it away?
All right, so Ryan, just tell us a little bit about why you wrote this resource and how you thought it could help us.
Well, so part of it was that I had been basically for about 5 years had been part of the UMedia network and had been from the start involved with Art Lab Plus, and I felt that there were some things that weren't that I was doing with my staff, with the knowledge that at some point that I would probably need to move on. And I at first was just thinking of moving on to another department, and then I realized, and because I wanted there to be mobility for my staff and ownership for my staff, and I also understood that upon reflection, had reached my limits in terms of what I felt I was bringing into the equation, and wanted to kind of give room to more people to start taking on that vision and have them take it in another direction. The other thing, too, is that within my generation, an older baby boomers are not retiring as early. And so because they're not retiring as early, they're basically kind of putting a ceiling on mobility for a lot of other generations who are coming in to this, coming into museums and coming into administration. So there was a part of me that thought, well, wouldn't that be cool just to do that, find a way to just allow for mobility to happen for others. So that was part of it. Part of it was that on reflection after I left, I realized there were some things I should have done and that I would like to impart to other people. And another thing, too, is that because we're all part of this network, that there's mobility not only out of leadership positions, but into other kinds of positions. And I've noticed that over my 5 years, that people were moving around between different learning lab sites or different different parts of the network, working for different people. And so it's really important to create continuity and to relay the history to people who are succeeding you, so that you can make sure that it's not this constant starting over, but you're building off of something.
Yeah, one thing I really like about your resource is the way you have it written is that you provide kind of three major focus on an overall framework for success, and then what to set up before the transition begins, so things you want to have in place before you leave, and then what to do during the time of transition, and then how to follow up afterwards. So that's really nice. Sometimes there's maybe one of those pieces, but it's nice to really think about a whole picture of transitioning for success to really help the organization, the staff, and overall the center. That was really, really helpful.
Yeah, for me, thank you. For me, I think it's really that you, part of it has to do with that the staff needs to be incentivized, because teaching is easy with teaching to burn out. And so it's really important to keep incentivizing and creating new opportunities for people to learn, and also that people to learn to take on leadership opportunities and to become more proactive. And I think that the Learning Labs and UMedia centers are a great place to do that, because we're just starting to grow, and that it's a new field. So there's a lot of chances for people to be learning on the job, taking on more responsibility, and also for mentorship even after a person, like after the the former director leaves, there's still opportunity for mentorship. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I tried to figure out ways to apply all the models that I've been learning through UMedia actually into the administration part of leaving. I did not necessarily know that I was leaving until maybe closer to the time, but at the same time I felt like really dedicated to making sure that there's always shared leadership, even whether you're staying or going. It's so important to share that leadership, I think.
So I have a question, and again, I think this is a great document because it is about transitioning, but it's also about leadership, both as a manager and cultivating leadership in your staff. And I think one of the things that Learning Labs might struggle with is overcommitting. Both they have staff that are go-getters, and then we want to work with other departments. And you touch on giving staff opportunities to work with other departments. Do you have any advice for allowing staff to work on projects with other departments without overcommitting time and therefore creating like an environment of stress and overwork?
I think that the situations that were happening at the Hirshhorn were ways that Art Lab staff were working with other departments that made sense to Art Lab. So I kind of tried to think of it as the model of we were kind of working with other Smithsonian units, and we would work with different partners on initiatives, and I try to think about it as in the same way, that somehow it was meeting a goal that Art Lab had. And so even though within this document I'm kind of framing it as being about the staff, it was still, well, part of the goal was also to make sure that the museum, that we were somehow integrating more and more into the museum. But I have to say the other side of that was that a lot of times your staff, your mentor staff, has technology abilities that other departments want and don't have. And so, for instance, with the case of Drew, Drew ended up working for another department over time. so that was kind of, but it was the place that he wanted to go, and so it worked out fine. And then we, hired to replace him. But at the same point, that whole process began as being related to Art Lab, and then at some point it was realizing that his interests were in another direction. That makes sense. So I don't know if that answered your question completely, but I think it's, as long as it goes back to the goals of the goals of your Learning Lab, that's initiating it, that seems to be part of the work. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. Yeah.
So Ryan,
Yes.
Quick question: if you were, now that you have been gone from Art Lab for, has it been 7 months, 6 months, 7 months?
Let's see. I feel like it's 5 months, maybe 4 or 5 months. So it hasn't, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say are your, and now that you've had a few months away from your resource, what would you say would be like your biggest takeaways from transitioning out, and without giving away too much of your resource?
Oh, okay. So I don't have to say everything.
Right.
My biggest takeaways was the importance. My strong suit is not always logistics. I mean, I'm fine. I survive doing logistics. It's passable. But I think there would have been probably a time where I should have sat down with people more and talked about certain procedures I had internally to follow up with people, or certain run through partners or run through people I've worked with, and kind of give people more of a an inner an idea of how to work with them. And so those are things that I think I could have done better. I think I did a lot of nurturing, which is great, but I think in retrospect maybe setting up some more structures. So I think that's where this document came out of, which was the need to set up set up structures before you leave and how that works out. I also think the biggest takeaway, maybe not as much that, because that is going to change no matter what you do. If you leave, people are going to go, well, this structure's not working for us, so they just might, you know, get rid of it. But I do think the one thing is to let go. You have to kind of let go, which is hard. Founders complex or something like that, where you find something, you want to keep it going as how you found it. And so there was a part of me that felt like, oh, wouldn't this be great to transition leadership and make sure that someone else is available to take it on? And I had known that a long time going into this. But the second part was, I think, letting go and knowing it's going to have a completely different direction. It's going to probably go to a place that I hadn't imagined, which is what I was excited about. And and I think the hardest thing was when I was taken off of our resource page in Facebook. It was so great to just lurk and spy, and I couldn't do it anymore at some point. The plug had to be pulled. So that was hard to not be part of that exciting creative process that I feel like I helped set up. So, you know, you gotta just go, okay, that's something I need to let other people do now. So that was a big and knowing that it's in safe hands because you've done as much as you can to mentor the people in the position, and you've trusted them and hired them and all of that. So.
Right, and ArtLab is in really amazing hands with Don and Amy. You've mentored them well.
Right.
My favorite thing that you described this as during the retreat was you're like, well, it's kind of a tear-stained love letter in a way, which matched up really nicely with Jennifer Greenlee's research that she presented last week about the dating guide to partnerships. Cool. Are there any other questions that you guys have or any other comments you want to make about Ryan's resource? Any last words?
I just have one quick question. You talked about in the very beginning of your resource that creating new structures and new ways of working can kind of permeate out into your wider organization. Did you get to see that while you were there?
That last part I think I may have lost. Did I get to, and then it went wah, 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 wah.
Did you get to see the new creative ways of working and new models of leadership that you're creating in ArtLab permeate out into the wider organization?
I saw more of a loosening up of how people imagined programming could be. I saw ArtLab becoming kind of the fun department. You know, there was a social fun aspect that I think it gave to the museum, and I really wanted there also to be a sense that ArtLab was a place for experimentation and new ways of thinking would be encouraged and happen, and that would influence the museum. I think that's happening. I think when they see, it really comes down to the leadership and what the leadership is looking for. And so one of the challenges with the Hirshhorn at the time was some transitions in leadership, but I do feel like ArtLab's poised now with kind of a reputation that we had established to be a place where people would go for new ideas, and since some of the staff that's working at the Hirshhorn is also had come through ArtLab's program, but is now working in other departments. That's a really good thing too. So, yeah, I think so. I definitely think it has something to do with the sensibility and a different work style, and people see the positive results of that, and then they start to, you know, one would hope will start to say, oh, these are things that are working, and this is the way that they work. So the best advocates really for the program are the mentors themselves. And when people start to work more and more with the mentors, it allows that work style to kind of permeate the rest of the museum. Did I feel like I saw that? Yeah, I think I saw that. I think it was subtle, you know, but I saw it.
That's great. I mean, it's such a different thing. With my experience in libraries, it seemed like you had to be more protective of your staff and not let them. I don't know if this is the same in your libraries, Adrian and Kendra, but it was almost like there was a less willingness to share staff. Be like, well, they only have like 20 hours a week. They really need to focus on this stuff. And it seemed like lending them out to other departments would be sucking their time or potentially sucking them away from your department, which is what seemed like happened with you, Ryan. But I really love the idea of kind of embracing that and being like, well, if that's the direction that they're leaning towards anyway, we should open up that pathway and that avenue for them.
Right. No, I think that's a good thing. I think as long as you feel like you can keep bringing in mentors to replace them, because I think there's also, your space goes through these growth patterns because your audiences are changing. The teens that are coming in have different interests, and those interests are a combination of the mentor's interests but also the teen's interests. And as that starts to change, you find certain skill sets aren't as needed as much anymore, or that it's a bit organic. I mean, you have to just be aware of what's happening and kind of see it. And a lot of this, of course, is in retrospect, so I'm not magical in any sort of way. But that said, yeah, I think setting up a learning lab as a place where the rest of the institution can learn about their audiences, but it's also important to be able to learn from the institution what it wants, and so a lot of the things, some of the things that we did were actually in response to either the Smithsonian, and I think now more Amy is dealing more with in response to some leadership that she's getting from the new director. I think all of those things were kind of linked with both funding, but also linked with how to make what you do relevant to your institution, which is really important. Yeah, that's the best way I could say it. You have to be, you have to be meaningful to your institution, or they won't understand why you're there.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan, and thanks, Adrian and Kendra, for jumping in on this.
Yes, thank you.